First question is to Phil, and gets to the nub of the issue here, I suppose, Phil. What is the business model in 3 years' time now for media owners and indeed the media as a whole?
Whenever anyone says to me, what's the future for media, I actually have to break it down. When I showed that chart as to where I think the advertising is moving between 12 different segments, actually it's moving very differently for very different parts of the media. So if you're a newspaper company, you're in a very different situation to whether you're in a broadcast environment or whether you are a business-to-business publisher. In terms of what it will look like, actually, for vast swathes of the media industry, it will not look very different in 3 years to what it looks like today, but in certain fundamental areas, it'll be very different. So the place that we tend to see the biggest obvious impact is in what's happened with classified advertising, which used to be a very much a print-based medium and has shifted very, very successfully online. It's shifted in ways where the pricing of classified advertising has dropped because the online inventory is almost infinite, but it's dropped away from media companies that were really quite dependent on classified advertising. So if we look at the UK newspaper industry here, in 2004, the advertising revenues for the newspaper industry in the UK were about £5 billion. Last year they dropped to about £4 billion, and we think they'll be down to £3 billion by 2010. And the vast majority of that has come out of regional advertising, which is classified. So there are some parts of the media industry which will be very different. And that's when I say some of the things that come out of the recession at the end this time will not be the same as what went in. That's an obvious one. I think the more fundamental question is what's happening with display advertising, and will that actually structurally change as it goes through, as we think about some of the social networking side of things, and actually different routes to market for advertisers. The example of Specsavers with the Channel 4 TV show, I think is a really interesting example, because it's advertising spend which is bypassing traditional measurement. So we can see how much they pay to Cactus Television in order to sponsor that. When we ran a panel at MIPCOM last October, we interviewed Richard Pinder on stage from Publicis, followed by Tony Cohen from Fremantle. And actually they were both saying the same thing. It was, if we can find new and innovative ways to reach audiences, why are we talking about the old traditional ways? Now, my view for the 3-year question that you asked actually is it won't feel that different to how it feels today, but we will have seen the first signs of some fairly fundamental changes.
Mel, you have to grapple with this. This is your job, isn't it, really? So, you know, what's your view? We have I feel talking about things like Craigslist eviscerating classified advertising in the US. You know, how do you grapple with all that?
Well, first point is it's happening at different speeds in different countries. So US, Japan, Korea, UK are probably the 4 leading markets, and we're learning most in those in terms of then what we do in other countries. It means the profile of the kind of people we employ and within the agency is changing, and I alluded to the structure and organisation needs to change as well. So, and that's not easy because not all those skills are out there. Some of this stuff you're having to, you know, create new skills or borrow from other industries. And also some of it requires investment, which is quite tough in the climate that Phil outlined. So investment is more disinvestment in one area to create investment in other. So there's 2 main initiatives. One is the structure and behaviour, and making sure we are actively at different levels depending on the stage of the market investing in some of these new areas. And then the second area is we're testing quite rapidly. We're testing 4 or 5 new models, and that will probably be 10 by the end of next year. With clients in terms of engaging consumers. So that's quite a general answer to your question. I'd have to get into specifics channel by channel, I think, to go any deeper.
Well, we'll see where we get to. Jamie, you from the client perspective, how does that all play out?
Well, I think there's a couple different aspects to it again. I think one thing, just with the pressures on the business, the pressures in terms of this whole real-time aspect, is that things have to happen much faster. And when it's a global client dealing with multiple countries, some obviously being more advanced than others, it means that the work has to get done that much faster. And so the kind of old model of how global accounts used to run in terms of a local, regional, global layer is definitely changing. And again, in different ways for different clients, but you're seeing, or we're certainly seeing a flattening of that structure, and to enable us to deliver what the clients need that much
clients
faster.
have much more choice now, of course. That's the thing.
Clients have much broader choice, and it's also about having intelligence in place to keep them up to date, to be able to inform decisions. So, you know, even internally, we're using tools now, you know, social bookmarking tools amongst client teams to be able to flag, you know, if people are seeing intelligence in China or Russia, or, you know, to be able to pull that collectively, to be able to use that more effectively for the clients.
Yeah, with all these different media available now as well, digital media. Adam, you know, what about, you know, value-based compensation? That's something that you're having to grapple with as a in an agency now too, and you know, how do you make money? And it's so easily definable as to how much money you are actually making for a particular product or a company.
I don't want to overstate this. Our business, the vast majority of our income is based on, it's a service calculation, hours, cost-based contracts. A pretty small minority is based on media performance, that is, performance and media pricing, and a vanishingly small proportion is based on what I think you're talking about, which is sales-related results.
Yep.
There are two big problems with this. One is that the causation. I'm reading a book at the moment which was written 50 years ago where somebody at JWT was grappling with this very thing, Garrett Lydecker. And he said, I wrote a list of things that could affect sales, and I got to 43 before I got bored, and advertising was one of them. So if I'm buying the great media space, but it's a crap ad, and it's not going to shift the product, I mean, how's that? So that's the first obstacle, is causation. The second obstacle is upside-downside, that clients will generally want to share the downside with you, but they're not so mad about sharing the upside. So these deals are quite difficult to put together. So I'm not sure that's a big bump in our road at the moment.
Mel, how do you see that?
We have as Adam says, a lot of our income is based on fees and or commissions. I'd say it's a mix, because this cultural, US is very fee-based, Europe tends to be a bit more commission-based. It will become more performance-based, absolutely. It's figuring out the models that we're comfortable to work with and clients are comfortable to work with in the causality space. I completely agree. Performance, definitely, in areas, you know, cost per acquisition or direct response has always tended to have models in the performance space. So I think we're learning most from that side of the business, and a lot of those models will come into our business. At the other side, the other thing that will impact is there'll be more automation. Jamie talked about analytics and data and the importance of that. I think in the digital space where there's unlimited supply, we'll see more automation as well. So Phil alluded to cost structures. The cost structures in terms of how we manage and serve and sell digital space will have to reduce as well. So technology plays a very important part. So we're not going to get a lot more money, put it that way. So we've got to be able to find ways to better manage our cost base and reduce that. Exactly as Phil said, that affects agencies as much as it does media companies. And we've got to find new ways of shifting the models to a more variable model, if you like. So a mixture of fees and probably a mixture of more performance based on causal factors rather than necessarily media buying price.
Yeah, addressable media, social media, looking beyond that now. And Phil, just break down the channels where you see the growth coming. Particularly, you alluded to it in your talk at the start.
Yeah, I mean the chart that went up, actually the fastest growth rate that's on there is video games, which I always have to then rein myself back and say it is definitely the fastest growing, but it's from such a tiny base. So the things that are actually making a difference is the totality of online. But as I showed in the chart, I think we need to be really careful that we don't just use online as a one-size-fits-all kind of proposition. And if we start to break online down, I think the interesting side of things up to now has been search. The next interesting part of that has been the classifieds, and the really interesting part to see whether it's going to have a huge impact will be online display. In terms of the bits of the market that are moving downwards most, it's undoubtedly newspapers. If you looked at the global revenue numbers that we track, newspapers were about 24% of total advertising in 2008, and we think that'll slip by about 8 percentage points of the total down to 18% or 16%. And that's the money that's going on online. But I agree that the place that's not hurting is video content. So television, I think, will maintain its share of total advertising over that period. It will be different in different countries because people start from different infrastructures. But on the totality, we think television is in good shape. In the UK, we think television, actually, when you take the totality of how people will arrive at seeing television content, whether it's through the old analog television, it's through the new digital televisions, it's through online and video on demand, TV holds its own. So the two places that are having this fundamental shift are more money's going onto the internet, but we need to be really careful about what we mean by that, and money is coming out of newspapers.
Adam, everything seems to be all about a screen. We all want to look at a screen. This is what all these media have in common. Now, where does this leave media owners who want to get onto those screens as well? Because, I mean, free is the concept here. I mean, it seems like it's becoming heretical almost, because radio was free, TV was free, and when these things become ubiquitous, they have to become free of charge. So how do you make money?
I think the media we have to buy, as opposed to the ones we don't have to buy, are the ones with reach. And reach can be about scale or about definition, but it's people we have to get to. Now, a newspaper may have 40 million unique users around the world, but that doesn't mean it's much commercial use as reach, and as far as I'm concerned. A lot of those people will be tourists, and we don't know very much about them, and media is essentially local. So giving me a global audience, 40 million, there's not a lot I can do with it. So I suspect that if we're talking about newspapers here and paywalls, I can see why that would make sense. Because you go behind a paywall and suddenly you discover who your customers are, what they want, what you can learn about them, and then what you can sell to the advertiser. Because we've been content to buy awareness from traditional media owners, and that we still need to do that because that's where a lot of this stuff starts. But now we want to relate that to a transactional outcome of some sort. And I think you're going to have to, for a media owner to be in a position to tell us about transactional outcomes, they've got to know a lot more about their consumers, which means you've got to put them behind a paywall. Now,
There are people willing, that's the thing.
well, we'll find out. It's fundamentally not my problem, it's a media owner's problem. But if you're going to give your premium content away, you're going to go bust eventually. So is it a question of do they go bust quickly or slowly? I don't know. But I think we've got to get, if I'm from media owner's perspective, we've got to get over this idea of giving everything away for nothing.
From the client side, where would you recommend that people go and get the most effective advertising looking ahead?
Well, I think growing now, you see many clients who are more interested in, yes, of course the channel is important, but the media owner brand, and I would say their point of view, is also extremely important. And because if there's the assets in terms of having that point of view, that will be unique content, which will presumably be something that people are more likely to want to pay for. We'll see. But at the very start, you have to have that unique point of view. And so, however that gets delivered in the context, in the format, on the screen, doesn't, really matter if the inherent content is something that is valuable.
Efficacy, Phil?
Yeah, just before we do efficacy, can I jump back to something Adam said? Because I think that is the media owners' problem, but actually I think it's wider than the media owners. And I think what we're beginning to develop is an idea which is kind of a difficult idea for me personally, but I think has to be challenged, which is that this could well be a very short space of time that is the golden age for the consumer, because we're getting stuff for free that we didn't used to get for free. But the business models are unsustainable for the current era. If we're not paying for things, there's not enough advertising to support everything that we want to consume. This is not just a media problem. If you look at the telcos used to make their money from charging for voice. Now they've gone flat rate on data. And actually, if you spool it forward, something like the iPlayer in the UK has been totally transformational for the amount of data which is going through pipes. But nobody's making money from it. And so you've got the ISPs saying this is unfair, you've unleashed this wave of usage on us, but we're still on this very small, all-you-can-eat kind of package for broadband internet, and we need to rebase that. So the telcos are saying we need some more money. The media owners are saying, well, nobody's paying us for our content anymore because there's not enough advertising for it and people don't want to subscribe, so we're unsustainable. And the only person who's having a really great time at the moment is us as individual consumers. And I think something has to shift. And I think it's going to take something fundamental or some great brand to fall over or some great media owner to fall over before everybody else actually says enough is enough.
Well, advertising was going to be the hope here, wasn't it, Phil? It was going to pay for everything.
Yeah, media owners love advertising. But if you really break it down to what is a media company for, and this recession has really forced a lot of media companies to think about what they are for, what makes them special, what makes them differentiated, why do people choose to spend time with them and their product and their content and not spend it with somebody else? That's a fairly fundamental question for the media owners to come back and challenge themselves again. Because in the good times, you end up spending money on a lot of peripheral activities and saying it's nice to invest in these areas. But in the bad times, you have to rein back and say, actually, what am I for? And in doing that, I think you go back to the core values and the core brands and what you're offering your audience. And in doing that, your message can become clearer. And your message as to what you then sell to advertisers and the community that you've gathered around you changes. And so I think there's more clarity in a number of media owners as to what they're for, but also the dawning realization that there's a whole set of challenges which may well put them out of business, whether that's communities that have aggregated themselves and then therefore become attractive to advertisers and therefore outside the control of the media owners, or whether it's just that they can't get somebody to pay for the content that they used to have because what they used to produce has no longer been difficult to generate.
Mel, you must have a view looking over the fence.
Yeah, it's, just to build on I think advertising will remain important and become more important. The challenge is in an online environment, people are not quite as accepting as the level of advertising as they are in TV, but I think that could change as viewing shifts. And at the other end, premium content people will pay for, particularly in the niche area. It's not just about the content or the quality of the content, though. There's two other factors, access and convenience, which are really important. And so I think, particularly in the news space, people are more likely to pay for access and convenience, say in mobile devices. And they're more likely to pay for what I would call modularized content. So this is from the entertainment business. You know, if you're into diving, for example, and you want to look at with your chums, where's the best place to go on a diving holiday? Wouldn't it be great to get all of the diving content from Lonely Planet in one place, downloaded? So I think there are ways of building, they're micro models, they're not macro models, but there are ways of building micro models that address access and convenience, as well as the premium content thing. And Phil's right, there is a point where, there's going to have to, I've got a 23-year-old at home, and I'm just amazed at his attitude to content and what's free and what's not free. I'm just, and he's no exception. So there is a big difference, I think, between our generation and teenagers today, and there's going to be a breaking point there that will mean that there'll be something that shifts to premium content that people will pay for. So, and that's more likely to be in the entertainment, movies, music space or whatever. But access and convenience are important as well as content. There's one other model which people call, I think they call it freemium. So Spotify, FT does this. So they give a certain amount free to get people engaged and into it, and then they pay for the premium elements of the content. So that's a kind of hybrid model. I don't know how well it's working because it's relatively new, but I think it seems quite an interesting area.
Jamie?
Yeah, well, even just building on that, because with the FT model, it also means that for the part that is public, it also means it's searchable, so that things like Google still can at least track that piece of it.
There's nothing more annoying than finding the search and then it says you've got to pay to read the rest of it.
Well, that's the thing. I think there it comes to the value exchange, and if it's something where, it's going to be, where does the pleasure exceed the pain, and because it will take time to register, it takes, and if you're on your mobile device, and, how many screens do you want to have to go to before you can actually get behind the wall? And if it's something that is premium and of great interest to you, you'll be more willing to make that effort than, if it's something that is going to be a one-off and it's going to take you 10 minutes to find something, or to, be able to find something that will be of value to you for 1 minute. The iTunes model, effectively they just opened this up and brought the whole micropayment universe to life in a way, because it was just so easy and simple, and with apps as well. If you can download something in 30 seconds and then have a use out of it for 6 months, a year, that's a good value exchange.
Right, final question, I'm going to put it to each one of you. Adam, first of all, if you were chief executive of a media company, where would you invest for growth while protecting your traditional growth, your revenues from your traditional platforms?
I think the startling characteristic of this recession has been the survival rate of media ownership, which has created a pretty well perpetual abundance of media inventory, which has kept a cap on pricing. It's interesting from a buying point of view. And the credit crunch, so how they survived by firing people. So they've killed a whole lot of cost in their business. So their cash positions are looking pretty good. The merger and acquisition business has taken a holiday with the credit crunch. So I think there's a lot of unfinished business there. So if I were a media owner, I'd be looking at, am I predator, am I prey? Make my mind up. And then when I've decided, arrange my assets accordingly. So I think it's an M&A question for media owners at the moment.
Phil, M&A question, do you think?
Yeah, I don't disagree with that. I think the question is, what will they buy? Will they buy more things that look like themselves, or will they buy something that is transformational and something that they haven't got? It goes for me back to the question, this fundamental, what are we for and what are we going to be for tomorrow? Because for a media company, it's about how do I attract audiences who are either going to pay for my content themselves, or by the simple fact that they have arrived at watching my content or consuming my content, they'll be attractive to advertisers. And so for me, it's something about understanding where the consumers are going next, and making sure that you facilitate that experience for them, either by something you own yourself or by something that you've done a strategic partnership with. And when we do it each year at Davos, we launch a global survey of CEOs across all industries. What has been striking in the last couple of years is that the entertainment and media CEOs that we survey globally are much, much more open to collaboration than the CEOs of some other industries. And that's, I think, because there's a realization that you can't do everything yourself anymore. There used to be this thought process that your most valuable resource walked in the door at 9 in the morning and walked out at 5 in the afternoon, and that you had to control that resource internally. A lot of the media companies that we talk to now have kind of flipped that, and they've said the customer is at the heart of the organization, and then they work out who is best placed to deliver to that customer. So we've talked a little, not too much today, but somebody mentioned fragmentation, which for us always tends to start at the corporate being worried that their audience is fragmenting. Because we come at it from the other angle quite a lot of the time, thinking about consumers, we don't talk about fragmentation anymore. I like your liquid content, because it's the same thing that we think about. We talk about ubiquity. Consumers want to be able to consume things anytime, any place, anywhere on the device that they're choosing. They don't like having to swap between devices that don't talk to each other. And so media companies that can control an individual through the course of a day, from the news that they get in the morning, through the feeds that they get at work, maybe a B2B feed as well, all the way through to what they read on the way home and what they watch in the evenings or listen to. If you can control and be part of the integral experience for an individual across all of those media, you're much more powerful and you're much more attractive both to the consumer and to an advertiser.
Jamie, same question.
Yeah, I mean, just building on that, I think, because what you're really talking about is the human experience, and becoming part of, for your audience, becoming part of their life. And so I think definitely it is about having that unique point of view and being able to package that. So for a media owner, whatever assets they don't have to be able to make that happen would be what I would look to plug.
Mel, back to you. Final question before we throw it to the floor.
Just to build on, rather than repeat, build on what people have said, modularize content is crucial, and technology and all of this is quite critical as well. It doesn't have to be lots of hardware particularly, it's much more about pipes and software and applications. So that's to get that fluidity, that liquidity, that's kind of really important as well. So, you know, a lot of people don't need to originate more content. It's more about how you port and use and change the formats or interrogate the content you already have. And absolutely, I think you'll get much more mixed content. You know. Last point, social commerce is emerging very, very rapidly. So a lot of people thought there wasn't a business model in social media. We're not completely sure there is yet, but if Facebook or people like that can convert their relationships into e-commerce relationships, and that's also quite interesting as well as an area that's certainly beginning to take off.
And it's already working for non-profits
in
a way. Yeah.
For non-profits particularly, and small businesses and location-based businesses, but it will grow.